Our next speaker is State Representative Mindy Domb. Representing the towns of Amherst, Pelham, and part of the Granby in the State House. Good afternoon. I'm really happy to be here with you in the snow. Minnesota's not the only place that can rally in winter. And I appreciate so much what Rep. Sabadosa said, and I want to add just a piece to this. It's not only about us and you showing up at the State House in Boston, it's you reaching out to people you know in other parts of this state and getting them to call their elected officials too, as well as people who live in other parts of the country. We live in an area where we all know people who live in Indiana, Oklahoma, Nevada, Florida. Let's activate our personal networks. I'd like to first, before I was asked to speak for a little while, and I realized the weather may make us a little cold, so I'm going to try and speak a little quickly. I'm not usually a rally speaker, so I appreciate your indulgence. I want to first thank the Pioneer Valley Women's March and the Indivisible Northampton for organizing this today. This is the fuel that we can use for action, and I am deeply appreciative of your organizational skill and your ability to whip this up pretty quickly. I also want to give a shout out to 413 Staying Connected, who since a month after the election of Donald J. Trump has been keeping us all informed about rallies, marches, meetings, and information that also keep us activated. Let's give them a shout out, please. I also want to shout out another representative that's with us today, and that's Rep. Natalie Blake from the 1st Franklin District. Where are you, Natalie? Thank you for coming. I also want to give a shout out to our state senator, Joe Comerford, who's not here today, but in her most recent worked at MoveOn.org, which helped to create the national infrastructure that activated today's demonstration here in the Commonwealth and across the country. Let's give it up for Joe. She also has a bill in the Senate, which I'm a proud co-sponsor of, calling on the impeachment of Donald J. Trump. There's another bill in the Senate, in addition to safer communities, giving immigrants and everybody, regardless of their documentation, driver's license, making sure that immigrants and DACA folks can go with in-state tuition. There's another bill, and that's a bill that I think is a hat tip to a Northampton native, Jennifer Tao, which says that there will be no presidential candidates on a primary election ballot unless they release their tax return. I'm proud to co-sponsor that one too. I have to say that this national emergency is a national emergency. The national emergency is that the President of the United States, or better should I say, the occupant of the White House, Donald J. Trump, decided that he could actually go into our democracy and take away power from Congress for a military use. Now, you and I might think this wall is ridiculous, it's unfounded, quite frankly, it's bull. I'm now an elected official, so I can't say that other part, but you can. Shit. But the reality is, what he just did is the first step that fascist dictators do. Yeah. He went to something that's money allocated, hopefully for a human need in the United States, and he's redirecting it to what he decided was a military purpose. That's a national emergency. Yeah. So when I was asked, thank you, when I was asked today to talk about what I thought might be real national emergencies, I actually took a riff off of what Representative Sabadosa did, and I made a list. But before I go on my list, I also want to give another shout out. This morning I checked, and there are about 6 organizations that have already started lawsuits against Trump. I want to give them a shout out, because if you have extra resources, this is a good time to send a donation to one of these organizations. Public Citizen, the ACLU, the ACLU in Massachusetts, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and the Center for Biological Diversity, because they're upset that the wall is going to interrupt habitats. And speaking of financial support, I also want to give a shout out to our member of Congress, Jim McGovern. A couple of weeks ago, you'll remember, he said he's not taking any corporate money. That means he's going to have a lot of corporate money against him. If you have extra resources, now's a good time to support Jim McGovern, besides, in addition to our love and affection for him, which I know we all have. So, what I decided to do with the national emergency was, I took a page out of my kids' first grade homework, where they have to make a table, and they do the alphabet, A to Z, and then they have to pick up like every animal that starts with the beginning of that letter, or food that starts with the letter. I made my own A to Z, actual national emergencies, and I'll try to read them quickly out of consideration for your work. What's a national emergency? Affordable daycare for everyone. A, that's a national emergency. B, the bullying that Donald J. Trump does on a routine basis, that's a national emergency. Feel free to jump in. Climate action, corruption, collusion, conspiracy, and criminal activity. There are a lot of that's deportations of our neighbors, and the threat of deportation for our neighbors. I represent Amherst. We have somebody in Sanctuary who's threatened with deportation. And diapers for all babies across the United States.
And detention.
The lack of funding and support for public education. The dereliction of our responsibilities to protect our environment. And of course, emoluments, a word we never even knew before. F, the food people struggle to put on their table. The crime of family separation. The attacks on freedom of the press. G, gun violence. The crisis in housing and homelessness, H. I, income inequality, where the 400 richest Americans own more than the quote-unquote bottom 150 million people. The top 1% owns about 40% of the total household wealth in the United States. That's a national emergency. Our infrastructure and the need to pursue impeachment, that's a national emergency. J, the justices, the Supreme Court, and all the other courts they're trying to pack. K, I give a hat tip on this one to my partner, kleptocracy. Okay, he came up with it. L, the lack of leadership. M, the misappropriation of funds, racial disparities in maternal health, and Mr. Mueller, who we all hope is on this case. N, the nepotism he's institutionalized. O, the opportunities lost, and the feeling we all get when we see President and First Lady Michelle Obama. That's my O. P, the structural poverty that's reinforced. The crisis for our planet. The ridiculous proclamations that he signs, and the real national emergency for the past year, Puerto Rico. Q, the attacks on LGBTQ rights. R, racism and the racist policies he promulgates. S, the state of our schools, exploding student debt, and these incessant threats of shutdowns. T, the efforts to make transgender folks disappear. The 25th Amendment, the tax forms he won't release, and the treason that is whispered about this administration. You, I'm almost done, although there could be more. You may have your own list. You, the unity we need, the unequal and unaffordable health care that exists, and the efforts to undermine our democracy. V, the vitriol he espouses, the access to voting he thwarts, the violence against women, people of color, our LGBTQ neighbors that he has unleashed. W, the livable wage that too many of us don't have. And the welcome mat he's destroyed, and white supremacists he's emboldened. X, the xenophobia that is the basis for every rule we hear from this White House. I couldn't think of one for Y, so all I can say is, why? And Z, the zeitgeist of toxicity and hate he has activated. I'm told to speak for 10 minutes, so I have total time. I encourage you to make your own alphabets. If you're on Facebook, put it on Facebook, tag 413 Staying Connected. We will repost it, okay? So that we can all create it. And I know that the frustration that was expressed before, what can we do? This is the first step of what we do. But I also want to end with a quote from one of my new sheroes, Greta Thunberg from Sweden. So she's 16 in January. So when she wrote this on Twitter, she was 15 and 10 months. She said, when we start to act, hope is everywhere. So instead of looking for hope, look for action. Then the hope will come. Thank you, everybody, for giving me time.